In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you all what LSD is like at different dose ranges, in my experience. So I got those dose ranges separated into 4 different categories: low, medium, high, and heroic. And I'm just going to give a little general gist on each one in my experience of what I think those different ranges of LSD experiences are like. So I'm not going to list off microgram range or, the actual dose that I think each one is, because that is highly subjective to the individual taking it. So I'm not going to use it as like a universal measurement. But I'm just going to say what I think and have experienced at these different categories of the LSD experience. So for the first category, being the low dose experience, a low dose of LSD, for me, would be like a little bit above what most people call a microdose. A microdose is taking such a tiny amount of LSD that you don't perceive it, but it affects you throughout the day in a positive way. Well, what I consider to be a low dose is just a little bit beyond that microdose, where you just start to feel it. And what it is that you start to feel is generally a sense of stimulation and like excitement and just like a pent up energy, and you want to go do stuff, and you want to be productive, you want to get stuff done. There's an intense enhancement in like motivation and creativity to get things done, and ideas are flowing, flow states are going. It makes for a good day, if you're going to work and take a low dose of LSD, you're probably going to have a nice day just bouncing right through the day, I'm not telling you to go out and take LSD, but I'm just trying to give you an example of what these low doses would be like. You could think of it as a general sense of stimulation and enhancement in yourself. Your mind feels clear. You feel awake and ready to take on any task that comes your way. Problems. Like I said, your mind is clear. You're able to see things clearer and understand things easier and not get wrapped up in confusion as easily. It seems like things are more understandable more easily on a low dose of LSD. Like I mentioned, flow states. Focus seems to be very enhanced on a low dose of LSD. You can, get right into a flow state playing a video game or doing a sport or doing some sort of activity that requires an attentive, laser-like focus. A low dose of LSD will have you, on top of that shit. Focused right on it. I don't know if I mentioned, but motivation. On a low dose of LSD, you might feel more motivated to go and tackle things that you've been procrastinating, or just to get on that thing that you've been wanting to do, you know what I mean? Or feeling like it is possible after all to pursue what it is that you wanted to do. Taking a low dose of LSD is basically just like turning up a switch on your receptiveness to yourself and reality. And it makes everything more available to you in your mind and more workable, and you can think things through easier, and you can observe scenarios seemingly a lot easier. Nothing crazy is happening at this point. You can just barely even feel it physically, and probably equally mentally, but these different things I've noted are just how you would function on a low dose of LSD, is this enhanced creativity and motivation and encouragement and a focus, a deep focus, Like I said, nothing crazy yet. The most that you'd feel physically at this dose range of LSD is like a very, very subtle tingle, maybe. Like a just you want to get out and do something. You want to move. You want to, like I said, go and do something. Go outside, move around, just do something that involves your body. But it's not even really a physically manifesting sensation at this point. Now moving on to the medium dose range, this is where I feel most people like to get to do what they call have an LSD trip. The medium range of LSD experiences is characterized by the first, what you'd call, distortions in your perceptions, you know. When you take a medium dose of LSD, the first thing here I have mentioned is alteration. What I'm referring to is when you take a medium dose of LSD, as it comes on, you're all of a sudden going to come to the realization that you feel different. You feel different. This is the first stage where you can noticeably see, okay, something's a little different here. And at first, at such of a low dose, you can't really pinpoint exactly what it is that's different. But something is nevertheless different about what's going on and how you feel and how your thoughts are functioning. Something's different. Sense enhancement. And this means all the senses. The tactile, visual, auditory, tasting. All of them are going to seem like they're just turned right up. Colors are going to look really bright. The details on everything are going to be popping out. You'll see, if you lean in close to a bed sheet, you'll see every little thread woven together. Or it's almost like your eyes are like a microscope on this dose of LSD, where you can just the closer you get, the more detailed and more stuff you see, and it all just keeps popping out. And the HD crisp detail never goes away like it usually does when you get too close to something. You're going to be more receptive to the feeling of things. Usually when I take a medium dose of LSD, during the come-up, I am busy feeling my own skin and feeling the surfaces around me and kind of just moving myself across all the surfaces, and it's because the tactile sensations seem to be getting really amplified. It's like you're more receptive to feeling itself. Music will sound really nice on a medium dose of LSD. You listen to a song that you've liked for a while, and it's going to sound awesome, you know what I mean? It's going to sound so much deeper, so much more layered. Or you could look at it and think it sounds stupid for some funny reason, but that's just a certain LSD scenario where you can ruin the magic for yourself. But, just to describe what I'm saying, you listen to a song that you think sounds cool when you're sober, and while you're on LSD and listen to it, it's like you can see how they made the song, and it's as if they weren't even trying or something. I don't know. It's weird. That was one scenario I've experienced. But a medium dose of LSD is also where you begin to experience the first distortions in your senses. This will usually take place mainly visually. In the first stages of the distortions taking place. But, you're just chilling, and you might see in the corner of your eye something like a shadow move, or a shadow disappear, or a light reposition, or do something weird, or it looks like an object falls off the table. And like I said, all of this is going to be on your in your peripheral vision. It's not going to be something you can directly look at. And it's just beginning to alter your vision and distort your vision, and you're going to start seeing things subtly happen that aren't actually happening. And you're going to be doing a lot of these right here. You know what I mean? If it's one of your first times going into an LSD experience. But if you have been in it a few times, you will just recognize the dancing of your peripherals and as the beginning of the experience. And I've heard it noted as peripheral information misinterpretation, which is pretty straightforward. It's where what you're seeing in your peripheral vision actually is being misinterpreted by your brain because of the LSD. So now instead of seeing the table or cup of water in your peripheral vision, you see like a cat or like a basketball or something. I don't know, just something weird. Or just the light moving around it can seem like the light is crawling around the room within a medium dose of LSD as it's first really coming on. I also have listed in the medium range deep thinking and increased emotional response. Deep thinking is where, you're hanging out with your friends on a medium dose of LSD. You guys are going to get into some deep talks. You guys are going to have some funny talks, laugh your ass off. Might even be some crying. Might even be some jaw dropping. You know what I mean? It's like things get surreal. Everything gets, it seems like everything gets meaningful and deep and interesting and fascinating. And everything is just like, wow, this is all so crazy. This is all so cool. Isn't this funny? Isn't this ironic? Isn't this far out, like the people just strewn out on acid talking about aliens and all that stuff, that's what I'm talking about. Is it makes you look at all these trippy different ideas and scenarios and stuff that you may have like repressed or thought was stupid might pop up and you might be like, damn, I wonder if that's legit. You know what I mean? Like just reconsidering stuff that you've thought or maybe haven't even thought about before. And it makes for some good conversations if you're hanging out with your friends, trust me. Unforgettable conversations. And like I said, increased emotional response. This is where, if you get jump scared on a medium dose of LSD, you're going to get really fucking jump scared. Whole body full of adrenaline. If somebody tells you a joke that you think is funny on a medium dose of LSD, you're going to die of laughter. It's going to be hilarious. You know what I mean? If you get filled with fear while on LSD, the fear is going to itself feel more intense and feel like more fear and more fearful fear, Everything is just amplified. Everything on LSD, like I've heard it put before, when you take LSD, it's like just turning up the reality volume, the volume of reality or something like that. And I love that analogy because when you get into the high doses of LSD, it can really seem like there's a volume meter to reality and what you've just done has cranked it to the max. It's a nice analogy, I feel. But yeah, what makes up the medium dose range of LSD is really just what you'd call a nice little LSD trip. You're having these subtle visual distortions that you can't necessarily look at. Your thoughts are altered and you're thinking deep and your emotions are very much so enhanced, as well as your sensual perceptions, your feeling and how good music sounds and how interesting conversations are. All of that stuff is just very much so stimulated on a medium dose of LSD. And like I said, it's where most people like to put themselves if they say haven't tripped before or don't like really getting messed up on psychedelics. A medium dose of LSD they'll generally have a good time. Moving on to the high dose range of LSD. First thing I have listed here is hallucinations. You could have guessed it. LSD has the ability to create seemingly impossible transformations of your vision, but it doesn't always have to be your vision, and it can also be the way things sound. You could be listening to a song and it just sounds completely messed up, completely like almost unrecognizable anymore, you know what I mean? And the difference between, there's a difference in my mind between visual distortions and visual hallucinations. Distortions are what you're experiencing on a lower dose of LSD, where things might just appear to be moving, a subtle little movement that corrects itself when you look at it, you know what I mean? It's like nothing's going crazy, nothing's really doing anything too far out. But a hallucination, which begins to manifest in the higher doses of LSD, and I'm not going to list off microgram range because I feel like it's highly subjective to the individual taking it. But on a high dose of LSD, you're going to begin seeing hallucinations, which is transformations of your visual perception. Things are going to look like they're constantly moving. Things are going to look like they are flowing, breathing. Things will look like they're breathing and shrinking and undulating and if you're looking at a set solid line, it could look like it's going like this, like getting bigger and smaller, or getting bold and then skinny and then bold and then skinny, and everything just looks alive. Everything is moving. Like I look at this right here, just this little wick right here. That would be like moving all over the place. It could be a snake or something. The texture of the things you're looking at is also moving, and it can appear to be creating all these patterns and designs that you weren't able to see before. You may see things like an object in your direct field of vision you might think is something else, only for it to transform into what it actually is while, like, in front of your very eyes. And you're going, what the fuck? I thought that, like, for example, I was hanging out with some friends one time on LSD, and it was nighttime. We're hanging out by the fire, and I look at one of my friends, and the people I was hanging out with was my brother and my brother's friend. And I looked at who I thought was my brother's friend, and their face kept morphing into each other. Like, it kept going from my brother to his friend to my brother to his friend, to the point I didn't know who it was standing over there in front of me. And I was like slowly walking towards him closer and closer, just looking at him like, who actually are you? You know what I mean? Because I couldn't tell who it was because their face kept transforming. You look in the mirror on a high dose of LSD, oh my god, dude, like, it looks like your facial features are, like, falling apart. Like, everything is, like, moving and jello, and my beard would be growing and shrinking, and my hair is coming uncoiled, and just doing all this stuff, you know what I mean? And usually, like, my eyebrows look like they're growing and shrinking and disforming and all that stuff. At this stage of LSD is where your mind starts getting blown just by what you're seeing and what you're witnessing sensually, you know what I mean? Like, like I said, it just seems almost impossible what the LSD is doing to your vision, you know what I mean? I feel like I need to keep explaining these hallucinations, but first of all, it's extremely hard to describe something so ineffable. And second of all, I feel like if you're watching this video, you may have been in an LSD experience yourself. So all I gotta say is, isn't it fucking insane? Isn't it crazy? You know what I mean? That's all I gotta say about the hallucinations. Thought loops. This is where, like, without even meaning to, you keep running through the same thought trains over and over again, whether it be in your own head or with the people you're hanging out with. It just seems like the whole vibe of the situation keeps falling back on this same, like, idea or same moment or same, like, scenario. Like, it's kind of like some deja vu shit, but you don't necessarily have to remember it's happening. You can unconsciously be running through thought loops for hours, you know, where if somebody sober was watching you two were just talking about the same thing for like 8 hours straight, you know, and weren't even really saying much different stuff when you were talking about it, you know what I mean? And when you catch on to it, it can feel really confusing because it's like you're being, like, backtracked mentally, you know, and it can get you a little, like, what the fuck am I thinking right now type mindset. And it can just feel confusing to be cyclically running through these trains of thought, you know what I mean? Short-term memory loss. This kind of coincides with the thought loops. You could be mid-sentence saying something to somebody on a high dose of LSD and then just look at them and be like, I don't know what I was just saying. Like, your brain just goes blank. You completely forget what you were just saying or what you were just thinking about or what that person was just talking about. Or, you know, you're watching a video and all of a sudden you don't know what the video is about or why you're watching it. It's like, Terrence McKenna kind of put it good. It's like the last 30 seconds of your life is gone. It doesn't exist. And it's a really weird, like, disorienting feeling to not remember that last 30 seconds because that last 30 seconds is how you got to where you are now. And if you keep continuously finding yourself in a position where you don't know how you got there, it can get a little weird. It can get a little confusing. So that is definitely one of the characteristics of a high dose of LSD, is constantly forgetting what you were just talking about or what you were gonna say or what you were trying to say or what your friend was talking about or whatever it may be. What's happening in short term isn't really transcribing into your memory, you know. And high doses of LSD is also where ego dissolution begins to occur. Now, I need to make a video on ego death because there are a lot of really weird takes on it, in my opinion. And in my experience of what I'd call ego death, it comes on and hits a little differently than people talk about it hitting, unless I've just never been to that level. But when I say ego dissolution, it's a characteristic of the LSD experience, of a high dose of LSD. And it's almost like I've described it as a psychic sensation. It's a feeling, but not in the same way as a physical feeling. And it's like this almost recognition that there is a separation or a gap between who you think you are and who you are. Put simply, it can seem like who you are is looking at who you think you are, and who you think you are turns out to be a phony, a myth, a poser, a fake, a douchebag. And it can feel like a dissociation between consciousness and concepts. mental concepts of who you think you are, and you realize, or are beginning to realize, because this feeling is arising that you are not who you think you are. Who you mentally construct yourself to be is not this live, raw, free, intense experience that I'm having right now. And you realize the buffer between how you describe things and who you describe yourself to be and who you think you are and what you think all this is. And you see the separation from that compared to what's actually happening, and how free and vibrant and open life and formless and mysterious life actually is. Now, I could go on and on and on about ego dissolution, but like I said, that's why I want to make another video about it. But on a high dose of LSD, ego dissolution begins to occur. I wouldn't call this full ego death. I would just begin to call this the ego beginning to become dislodged from its throne, and you're beginning to recognize the feeling of being alive and existing behind, all the descriptions you have for being alive and existing. So that's it for the high doses of LSD. The high dose of LSD is characterized by intense hallucinations, mental confusion, not being able to keep track of what's going on or the conversations you're having or what you're even thinking about, short-term memory loss, kind of like what I just said, just forgetting, getting confused, getting caught up or stumbling in conversations because you don't know what somebody's talking about, maybe even not understanding the words people are saying. I've never been there, but I can assume, I've heard it before, and I can assume it would be kind of frightening. Ego dissolution. Beginning to feel that you might not be who you think you are. So now to move on to the heroic dose of LSD. Now, I don't know if I'd say I've had a heroic dose of LSD. I kind of really just anecdotally put this stage, or this stage together, because based off of like what I've heard from my brother, and taking what I have had in LSD experiences and imagining what it would be like if I had taken more, kind of cheesy, I know, but I felt like I should just add in this stage to show that it can go beyond what I just described for the high dose. It keeps going. Some people say LSD has a cap, but I don't know about that. Find that cap. If you're one of those people that thinks there's a cap, go ahead and find that cap. Tell me what dose it is. So for the heroic dose, sense disorientation. You could also call this synesthesia. This is when what you're seeing gets mixed up with what you're feeling, gets mixed up with what you're hearing, gets mixed up with what you're doing. Everything you're sensing, everything that's happening, seems to all melt together into this one thing going on. And you could, metaphorically say, you're one with the universe. There is no separation between the sense fields. Everything is one raw, vibrating experience, all together, and you aren't anywhere in it. You are all of it. You are all of it. You are all the senses. You are all the things seen, all the things heard, all the things felt, all the things thought. You are everything, and you aren't fixating yourself anywhere. And if you're trying to, on a heroic dose of LSD, you might get a little frightened, because being everything isn't necessarily a choice on a high dose of LSD. It seems to be a chemically driven release of energy. So don't fight it if you find yourself in a heroic dose of LSD and you can't tell your sight, your vision from your thoughts. You're fine. You are just merging. You are just merging with the universe, So take it easy. Don't freak out. Don't call 911. Just observe. Just sit back and trust your nervous system, as Timothy Leary put it. Okay. So for the heroic dose, this is where the ego death occurs, where it's no longer a philosophical inquiry into who you are. There is no you. There is no who you are besides what's happening, besides everything, and there is no thing that is looking for who you are. You know how when you're sleeping, you're not concerned about who it is that you are and who it is that you think you are and whatnot. It's because your ego isn't present while you're sleeping. Awareness is, but not your ego. This is kind of what it's like on a full ego death, of what I'd imagine to be a full ego death, is there is no ego doing anything. There is no presence of who am I, what is this, who's it happening to, where is this, all that stuff. There's none of that on a heroic dose of LSD. All that's happening is what's happening. And it's just this merged, conjoined, single, interconnected thing. Amnesia. On a heroic dose of LSD, you might not be able to tell me your name. You might not be able to tell me that you might not even remember that you took a drug or something. Once again, these aren't things that I have experienced. These are things that I have heard reported from people who have taken monstrous doses of LSD. This amnesia is usually what I think people take ego death to be, is you don't remember anything. But amnesia is a little different than the ego death thing. Not remembering your name and where you live and that you took a drug and that you're a human. That's like memory loss. That's like memory loss. And that in itself can be completely life-changing and terrifying to some people. But I feel like it's a little different than your sense of self disappearing. You know what I mean? Unless you would classify your sense of self as your memory, which would be an interesting conversation. But nevertheless, amnesia. You're forgetting a lot of shit on a on a heroic dose of LSD. You're not able to, whether it be short-term or long-term, temporarily long-term memory loss, but you might not be able to recall some important shit while on a heroic dose of LSD. And for the last thing on heroic doses is constant and intense hallucinations. To the point where, it kind of coincides with the sense disorientation. Your vision is changing so much, so constantly, that you're not seeing what you'd call reality anymore. Now, I'm not saying that where we are right now is reality and where you go on LSD is fake and a hallucination, but what I'm saying is a sober person right now, like me, what I'm seeing on a heroic dose of LSD, this isn't what I'd be seeing. It would be fractal land. It would be distorted. It would be changing, morphing, turning into different things, breaking down, dematerializing, and turning into other things. You would not be seeing what foundational, sober reality is. Your every sense field would be completely distorted. Even the feeling of being a body may completely disappear, and you may feel as if you are nowhere. You might not even feel your body, and you might just be the entirety of space and time, Makes for a very interesting experience. Sounds, at that point, you might, at a heroic dose of LSD, you literally might not be able to comprehend language, or, your own thoughts. You definitely won't be able to read, because everything you're seeing, all the words are friggin', oh my god, like breaking apart and falling apart and turning into shapes. It looks like hieroglyphics type shit. But yeah, a heroic dose of LSD, there's going to be constant, intense hallucinations within all sense fields. So I think that's it. I tried to make this a kind of quick and rough overview of what LSD is like at these different stages. So I hope I covered everything kind of thoroughly, you know what I mean? But if you have any questions about these different effects that I've listed and what they could be like in further, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to answer you. So with that said, thank you all for watching, and I will be back with more.